Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's get started. My name is Dan Allwine. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Policy at Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, or SPC. SPC is the cooperative forum for regional collaboration and planning across the 10-county region in Southwestern PA. We host a water resource center that promotes regional collaboration on water topics, is a leader in facilitating coordination and education, and provides technical assistance to our member governments. Really excited for today's presentation, something we hear often about around the region and Pennsylvania, and that's MS4 stream restoration best management practices. And we're going to hear how the team at RES can share some insights with their long history of designing, permitting, constructing, and now maintaining over 40 miles of stream restoration in our Commonwealth. Before I introduce our speakers, just a few reminders. Today's webinar is being recorded. You will receive a link to the webinar in your email inbox. And just a reminder that all workshops are available at our website, spcwater.org. If you have any questions during the presentation, please drop them in the Q&A box. John and Hannah may address them during the presentation, or they may wait to answer them at the end during the Q&A session. During that session, please raise your hand. We will unmute you, and then you can go ahead and ask your question. So let's get started. Our presenters today are John Cassitz, the Client Solutions Manager for RES, and Hannah Kalk, who is a project manager at RES here in the region. John and Hannah, take it away.
Great. Does everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. My video, I think, is a little bit delayed, so I hope that doesn't kind of confuse people or disorient people. But thanks, Dan, for the introduction, and really, really happy to be here. Hannah and I will give a quick introduction to ourselves, and I'll start, and then Hannah can introduce herself, then I'll get back into the PowerPoint presentation. This is roughly based on some presentations that we've done over the past 2 or 3 years. At things like PSATs and some other, municipal or MS4 water quality focused presentations, but we've certainly updated this to hopefully be a little bit more educational, informative, lessons learned, case study type focused presentation. We as a company doing this kind of work are learning new things on every single project. New things in the field, new things in site selection, new things from a regulator review construct. So again, this is kind of a building towards our increased knowledge base within this industry, but again, acknowledging that we're learning new things on every single project. So some of these case studies I hope will be of interest to the group here, and certainly would like to keep this somewhat, kind of conversational, especially at the end as we have time for Q&A. We'll try to keep the PowerPoint presentation to 45, 50 minutes to give ourselves 15, 20, 30 minutes for Q&A at the end. And if we don't have Q&A, we can end early and everyone can kind of get back to the rest of their work days here. But real quickly, again, John Cassitz. I live in the southeastern part of the state, but work, with our work here at RES, work all across the entire state of Pennsylvania. Been here just about 8 years. In January will be 8 years. My background was 11 years in the environmental consulting industry with thru Associates. And there's a lot of consultants, engineering firm, stakeholders on the call here, probably a fair bit of municipal government stakeholders. So a lot of our staff, again, Hannah and myself included, came from the consulting industry. We've used the word turnkey implementer to kind of introduce ourselves as we kind of give this presentation here. Most of our work includes land acquisition, design, permitting, constructing, maintaining, monitoring these projects. So when we use the term implementer, it's the folks that are involved in the entire life cycle of these projects. So whereas we realize that the folks in the call here may be limited to their particular piece of the project that they're working on, these different stream restoration BMPs. And we also want to just kind of acknowledge that turnkey implementers like ourselves there can be, a little bit of jostling, if you will, with the other members of the community, the engineering firms, the consultants, the construction companies, nurseries, things of that nature that are all doing really good work to help, help their clients address these MS4 compliance issues. So we have just maybe a unique approach on it. Our unique approach does not work every single location around the state of Pennsylvania. We feel we've learned a lot of really neat, interesting things. We want to share them with the community here. And certainly, again, hope this can be an open dialogue and conversation. So Hannah, you want to quick introduce yourself here, and then we'll get into the presentation?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Hannah Kalk. I am out of our Pittsburgh office here. And I have been with RES about 5 years. I'm an ecologist by training, was with a number of different consulting firms prior to here, but I've spent about 10 years doing the consulting gig, and I've been here 5 years, mostly focused on water quality projects with municipalities and with PennDOT. So we're really excited to share what we're doing.
Cool. All right. Okay, quick overview of the agenda. I'll start off with kind of introduction to alternative delivery approaches, and again, maybe a unique, atypical thing to start with, but really that is part of the special sauce here with getting these projects done as cost effectively as possible for the end client, the applicant, the MS4 permit holder. And again, we've got some really neat case studies we're looking forward to sharing with folks here on where that full delivery, turnkey, design, build, operate, maintain procurement approach. The reality is, at the end of the day, if folks are interested in trying to get these projects done, I don't say better, faster, cheaper, really reduce the overall cost of MS4 permit compliance. Alternative delivery approaches is really the biggest way, the most impactful way to do that. So we'll spend a little bit of time kind of introducing that to folks here on the call. Hannah's going to pick up with really diving into some of the regulatory details of what makes, in our opinion, our experience, what makes good, cost-effective MS4 stream restoration BMPs, the things that we're looking for as we're looking for project sites on the landscape across Pennsylvania, MS4 BMPs, as well as the rest of the work that we do. We'll then highlight two different project case studies where that design, build, operate, maintain procurement approach was utilized to deliver the lowest possible sediment reduction credits for different kinds of customers, and one of which was just for PennDOT. Second one actually included several different municipal partnerships. We'll then touch on, again, the things that we've seen as an implementer on some other kind of creative ways to maybe think about getting MS4 projects, completed, funded, cited, et cetera. And then again, like to allow some time for Q&A here at the end. So project delivery methods. And again, kind of maybe an atypical place to start this conversation, but again, when it really comes down to the cost of compliance, this is the way to save money getting MS4 compliance when factoring in the life cycle of the BMP in the project, and kind of really guaranteeing and fixing the cost of MS4 compliance and ensuring it's as low as possible as folks are procuring or chasing the funding for these projects. This is starting to happen in Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Pennsylvania. It's been around a bit more probably in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, but the idea of stormwater taxes, stormwater fees, stormwater authorities, folks are starting to really wrap their heads around, MS4 is perhaps on a 5-year permit cycle, a multi-million-dollar regulatory compliance burden. And again, our goal with our customers is try to figure out how to satisfy that regulatory compliance burden as cost effectively as possible and reduce risk and liability for the folks who are paying for this work, which again, honestly, is all of us on the call here. If you're looking at PennDOT and their MS4 permit responsibilities, we're paying for that through our gasoline taxes, through our other, state and federal taxes. At a municipal level, again, folks in the call here, I suspect some of you are probably currently paying stormwater fees and stormwater taxes. So if we can collectively as an industry reduce the cost of compliance while getting good projects in the ground, it's really going to benefit all of us in society by really reducing the cost of this kind of new emerging area of kind of municipal regulatory compliance. So what most projects that get built, on the landscape, most municipally procured projects, most, transportation infrastructure projects, most projects that get built are done through a design, bid, build, kind of procurement steps. I've got a visual that I'll show next to kind of show what that looks like, but you're going to hire somebody to, do some site selection, find a location to build a project, whether the project is building a house, a road, a stream restoration, a Dollar General store, whatever's being built. Usually there's a design piece that might include permitting. Typically that scope of work ends when the permits are in hand, design's complete, you got an RFP for a construction package. And then you're putting a construction bid RFP on the street to secure a contractor who you hope and pray is kind of qualified to build whatever they're putting a price tag to. And you guys know who are the good contractors in your kind of regions and communities for the different things that you're procuring and building. Oftentimes, projects, and these MS4 projects have a multi-year long life cycle through kind of operations and maintenance of a stream restoration BMP. So the project doesn't end when the contractor, pulls away from the site and ideally there's something stable and then the stream's been restored. These projects have a much longer life cycle than maybe some of the other projects that we all work on in the rest of our lives. But that design, bid, build process is how most things get done. We've all kind of seen over the past 5, 10, 15 years, some progression or movement in certain areas towards design, build, or EPC type contracting approaches, where you're bundling more of the project responsibility under one entity and making them accountable to a design and build or whatever that different amount of scope of the work is, to make less cooks in the kitchen and have one entity responsible contractually, kind of regulatory liability wise, for the implementation of more pieces of the project. What we use a term full delivery or turnkey, or we'll explain design, build, operate, maintain, DBOM, or pay for performance. This kind of gets into the P3 world that, again, people are hearing about now. The full delivery world kind of takes that design, build procurement to the next step, acknowledging that certain kinds of projects oftentimes have a 5 to 10 plus year long life cycle when it comes to really true, complete regulatory compliance. So the goal is, find that one qualified entity who will take on the accountability for fixed upfront pricing, so everyone can build that into their project, their capital budgets, for the municipality, for MS4 compliance, to deliver on a 5 to 10 year long project and kind of guarantee the delivery. And again, this is difficult for folks to wrap their heads around. I can't tell you how many conversations we've had with municipal solicitors, with township managers, trying to wrap their heads around what's this look like from a contracting standpoint. Is this legal? Can we do this? I think the answer to that question is yes. Other people are doing it, but again, I don't want to minimize the challenges that folks like yourselves face with honestly just doing new things in a new way that's outside the way you've done business for the past 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. We're all humans. We realize that doing new things that are like millions of dollars worth can be challenging to wrap our heads around. But if this slogan makes sense, this is a 21st century challenge we're facing here with MS4 compliance. We as a society have built up 200, 300 years of kind of environmental debt with impacts on our watersheds, our water quality. The vast majority of streams in our Commonwealth are impaired due to some sort of legacy land use issue, acid mine drainage, excessive stormwater, lack of stormwater control, other pollutants, either direct discharge or non-point discharge solutions. We really as a society, are struggling with how we improve our watersheds that have been damaged from the past 200 to 300 years. And it's not, it wasn't our fault that we, cleared all the woodlands several times in Penn's Woods and all that dirt rushed down into the valleys due to a lack of E&S control. But we're here sitting in 2022 trying to figure out how to fix this stuff as cost effectively as possible. And these kind of new challenges really require new creative thinking about how to solve them as cost effectively as possible, with projects that are kind of sustainable, resilient, all of those kind of buzzwords we hear about. Basically, when I use the term resilient and sustainable, is doing work we don't have to come back and fix 3 years later because it gets blown out by a hurricane, a September, storm that runs up the coast. So we're not, fretting about, hey, that storm's coming up. I've got a stream restoration project halfway through construction. If that gets blown out, I'm looking at $100,000 change order to the contractor because, going through this traditional procurement process. So not to dwell on this, but that really is, in my opinion, kind of the special sauce to really get these projects done to satisfy MS4 compliance as cost effectively as possible. And just to give you a little bit of visual about how procurement usually works. And again, this is a decent visual of how many MS4 stream restoration projects get built. Again, siting, analyzing sites, picking locations to do things, maybe a different company getting involved to design and permit, a different company getting involved to build something and build a stream restoration project. Again, who's doing the maintenance and monitoring? Is it township staff? Is it the roadway crews? Is it some other internal staff within the municipality or the MS4 permit holder? Are you hiring a consultant to do that? Who's really accountable at the end of the day for this work being done and kind of guaranteeing that's going to get done as cost effectively as possible and kind of put themselves on the line to deliver for fixed upfront cost. And this is really what full delivery is gets you from A to Z for a pretty complicated 5 to 10 year long project with one entity accountable for delivering that at the lowest possible cost. And honestly, if things pop up during construction, it's on that company, it's on us as an implementer to figure it out, because we've done, and again, I'm always kind of crafting how I kind of communicate what we do. But and here's a new way of trying this. We've done, I need to do the math here again, but we as a company have done, I think we're up to 60 miles of stream restoration, 400 acres of wetland restoration across the state, literally thousands of acres under active management, conservation, preservation, conservation easements. We've done over $250 million of wetland stream natural resource restoration with 0 change orders. And that's pretty cool to be able to say. And again, really this is not, any special things about Hannah or myself. It's really in this full delivery implementation industry, which is the catalyst that has driven that phenomenal success of getting really good work in the ground, better, faster, and cheaper by doing it in a little bit different approach through full delivery or design, build, operate, maintain contracting. But, and again, this is nothing actually new within, the industries that we operate within as a company. In the compensatory mitigation world, again, the consultants on the call here, you guys probably are aware of wetland stream mitigation. That's a lot. That's how our company cut our teeth in Pennsylvania, was through wetland stream mitigation banking, turnkey offsite mitigation for the Southern Beltway, the Shell Cracker plant, the Pittsburgh International Airport commercial expansions, PennDOT districts 11, 12, 10. This is how we cut our teeth doing these kind of stream and wetland restoration projects. The cool thing was we just kind of took those lessons learned and those skill sets and the team we had developed, as well as external consultants and contractors working with us and for us. We apply that full delivery approach now to things like environmental lawsuits, where someone made a mistake during construction, bad stuff happened that impacted wetlands and streams. We can use full delivery to kind of commoditize that into, hey, you need 5, 10, 20, 100 acres of wetland restoration to address that environmental lawsuit, PADEP consent order. We can put that into fixed unit-based pricing. We go find sites, design, build, operate, maintain, implement, and we're oftentimes on the hook with the regulators to satisfy that litigant. I'm not an attorney, but the plaintiff, maybe you're ready to use the right term, their compliance responsibilities. Obviously, today we're talking mostly about water quality and stormwater offsets. Typically, the customers within this industry are municipalities in Pennsylvania, but if you're in Maryland, MS4 permitting runs up through your county. This is being used in other water quality industries. In Philadelphia, we build green acre retrofit projects that we do for fixed upfront costs based upon a green acre, which is a kind of a volume of stormwater coming off of impervious surfaces. In Virginia, North Carolina, other states, there's actually nutrient trading. That's, again, really full delivery implementation. So this is not necessarily something new. It is, however, relatively new in Pennsylvania when it comes to MS4 compliance. Again, some of our case studies will kind of introduce that. So Hannah, I'll quickly run through these because you're the technical expert. I am not, but then I'll let you take it over with the next slides, and then you just give me a heads up or a nod, and I'll click through the next things. But when we have initial conversations with our customers, other stakeholders involved in these MS4 projects, oftentimes we're kind of probing a little bit on kind of what are you looking for, and what do you think you need to satisfy MS4 compliance, when trying to find the best potential sites to do this. What's the scope of the work? Are you looking just for a design an engineering firm that can design stream restoration projects? Looking for a construction company? Are you looking for a native plant nursery to provide trees and shrubs and do riparian buffer plantings? All those are good things. So we're oftentimes trying to decipher with our customers on kind of what's the scope of what you're looking for, and where can we provide the most value. We're going to talk about public and private land. I think a lot of folks to try to identify projects as quickly as possible. If you're looking at MS4, potential BMPs, stream BMPs, the immediate go-to is, well, where can I find some streams to restore in the township park, the county park, public land? And that we do projects on public land, and that really can work sometimes if they're the best location to do the most cost-effective project. Conversely, another way of looking at it is maybe you want to consider private land, or really just consider public and private land, with the goal being finding the most cost-effective and sustainable project site that will reduce as much as possible the cost of MS4 compliance. You might find that paying, let's just say, $2,000 an acre to place an easement on top of a private property over a 2,000 linear foot stream project, 4 or 5 acres, that's $10,000 possibly in project cost. But that that private parcel where you're placing that BMP might save you $500,000 in sediment reduction benefit compared to a similar 2,000 linear foot stream restoration project on the township park, even though you're getting the land for free. So we look at public, private. Really, our blinders are on what's the best possible restoration BMP, stream restoration BMP. Public versus private ownership is certainly an issue that needs to be addressed and dealt with, but we're looking for the best possible projects first and foremost. But again, what's the life of the contract versus the life of the BMP? If you're only paying for design permitting services, that's all you're getting. Someone else is going to have to pick that project up and build it. And then again, these projects have a multi-year long life cycle through all the various state and federal permitting requirements, annual monitoring or biannual monitoring for the first 2 years, annual monitoring for years 3 through 5. Sometimes monitoring may extend through years 6, 7, 8. When you build a BMP in your current 5-year permit cycle, you're going to want that BMP to count towards your next permit cycle and your next permit cycle. And again, we're really focused on stream restoration BMPs. A lot of folks are doing a lot of other good projects, rain gardens, bioswales, stormwater basin retrofits. Those projects obviously need to be in the mix and can be good projects, and people are going to do those projects regardless because they want to, they should. However, a lot of the other BMPs that folks are using are going to have a lot more long-term O&M cost and liability and responsibility. You might have to retrofit that basin or manage that rain garden. And folks that, I've got rain gardens at my house here, rain gardens, bioswales, just take a lot of TLC that folks may not always think about in the front end as they get clogged with weeds and trash and debris. We found that good stream restoration BMPs, if you site it correctly, you build it correctly, you kind of get through the first couple of years of TLC and monitoring and maintenance correctly, we can walk away from these sites oftentimes at year 3 or 4 or 5 and never need to come back and spend any money on them outside of annual monitoring, which is really a cool thing, because again, to guarantee that BMP that you built in 2022, you're going to want to use that BMP in your PRP reporting in all those next and future MS4 permit cycles. Otherwise, you may have to, I'm struggling with the right term, but replace, maybe with the right term, those sediment reduction credits from a BMP if that stream blows out, 5 years from now. So we're really not going to talk about all the other kind of BMPs. We'll be focusing on wetland stream, stream restoration with a wetland restoration component to it. But again, easements, there's all kinds of legal documents associated with these projects that guarantee the access to them in perpetuity for monitoring and maintenance activity, conservation easements, declaration of restrictive covenants, deed restrictions, all kinds of other legal stuff that are part of these projects. how are you paying for this? Payment milestones for service and monthly invoicing for contractors, for design services. These are all the kind of things that we get involved in as we're kind of developing these projects to provide the most value to our customers. So Hannah, I'm going to pitch it over to you, and I'll just follow along with you as you're going through, and I'll click through the slides. So.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll get a little bit into the nitty gritty of how we cite these projects and how it's different from other projects. Not every stream is apples to apples in terms of what is and isn't cost effective, what is a high producing stream. We have found across the board that stream and floodplain restoration is the most cost effective way to do this if you're looking at substantial needs for reductions. I won't go through too much of this, but like John said, sometimes just because you have a public park with a stream on it doesn't mean that that's going to actually score out to be a good project in terms of the reductions and the gain that you get. And a lot of the types of projects that have been typically done where it's like minor amounts of bank work or actually trying to do intense armoring to protect buildings and facilities, they either do not count or are unlikely to count for much, and so they're not going to be a very cost-effective approach to do this, especially when, as John just went into pretty in depth, this is a project that is going to require maintenance for perpetuity, basically. And so stream BMPs are good for that because if they're done correctly with a floodplain approach, they're basically a low to no maintenance system. So what does a stream BMP look like for MS4 credit? I'll go into how we assess them here in the next slides. In general, you want to find a stream that's in the right place in the watershed. It's kind of like up in the headwaters where you can control what's coming into it. You want it to be relatively, at least 2,000 feet. And you want to have substantial erosion that actually will pass the MS4 eligibility requirements with the DEP. So we tend not to work on very large streams, and I wouldn't recommend that. There's just a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of modeling requirements. They obviously are much more expensive projects. We don't generally recommend them because they're a lot more likely to blow out and have repair and maintenance issues in the future.
Hannah, I think you got yourself on mute.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep, good.
Yeah. I'll jump into the regulation component of this in a second too. Got a question from Corey. What size drainage area is typical for your ideal sites? Yeah, so it depends. We prefer to, in urban areas, it's as you guys know, it can be very difficult to measure drainage area because stormwater is such a huge driver. We like to keep it under a square mile in terms of like the cheapest builds. But that being said, there's benefits too. If you've got a really, really good site, there can be benefits to working on larger streams too. So the biggest thing is knowing the regulations behind what it is and isn't creditable with the Clean Water Bureau, DEP. And there's many different variables. There's different approaches to calculating your original loading requirements. And so that plays into different approaches to calculating your credit or benefit from a site. So I'll go into these next. John, if you want to go to the next slide.
And Hannah, I'll go to the next slide here in a minute, but just to quickly, kind of what is the right team for the entire project life cycle? And again, I mentioned at the outset here, we understand the dynamic between engineers and construction companies, and if things don't go well, the engineer is pointing at the contractor is pointing at the engineer saying, well, your plans weren't that great, I did the best I could. We really believe a collaborative team approach to identify and assess these BMPs is absolutely critical to their long-term success. So when we have folks out in the field looking at prospective BMP sites, I mean, we're doing a lot of obviously desktop background GIS based assessments to identify potential locations. It's not like there's a team of 5 people that hits every single site we look at. But when we're circling in around what we think is going to be the stream restoration BMP we're going to use for a contract, and we're going to be on the hook for the success of that BMP, we have our land folks and real estate folks out there who know the landowner. They know how much land the landowner is willing to give up in the farm in front of their property, their house. We have our designers out there who are going to be putting the design plans together. But honestly, most importantly, we have construction-minded people out there doing the initial site selection, because they're the ones that have to build these things, and they're looking at construction access, existing utilities. How do I get into this site and then get out of this site without messing up more land on the parcel? So really having a team approach when assessing BMPs, in our opinion, is a way to really help avoid those kind of WTFs like 2 years into the project, where you're putting a bid out to contractors and you might get feedback from a contractor saying, I can't physically build this because I can't get the right size equipment in to access this location. Or if I can get into it and I build it a certain way, you have it phased in your construction bid package set, I can't get my equipment out of here. So if nothing else, having your design and construction people together, and again, that's easier said than done. I mean, within our shop, it's our internal people. So, hey, I want Hannah, Jimmy, and Zach Lankner to be out there, looking at these project sites with our land team. I would suspect for municipal engineers, the local contractors that probably should be doing this kind of work. You might be able to get them to visit the site with you to give you kind of a construction savvy view on these projects early in the process while you're putting design plans together, to kind of help check that constructability box off when you're working with your client, even though your scope may be limited to design and permitting.
Thanks, Phil. In terms of a little bit of background on the regulatory framework, most of you, it sounds like, are with municipalities or work regularly with municipalities. Any MS4 permit holder in PA within the Chesapeake Bay or within an impaired water with a TMDO has sediment reduction goals or pollutant reduction goals, nitrogen and phosphorus. And so as a component of your pollutant reduction planning, you have existing loading calculations that you have to do to determine what the goal for the permit cycle will be, and that's kind of step one in determining what how you cite a stream BMP. So I think that's just a point we wanted to raise, is that when you start thinking about this as an option, you need to take a look at how your loading counts were done. If you use simplified method, which is a little less work up front, you're being directed by Clean Water Bureau to use the Chesapeake Bay Expert Panel Protocols, which are methods and guidance documents for determining site-specific loading. So you actually have to get more data on the back end about your BMP you're proposing. But it also helps guide you through what kind of credit this particular site could provide. And so this is one of our lessons learned here. The last 5 years we've been doing this is especially when you start having partners, entities partnering together for these projects, you can have different initial methods that can result in different ways that these things have to be calculated on the back end. And so if you have an entity that has done local watershed scale modeling, use MatchShed, something like that for their pollutant reduction plan, they are able to claim a default rate for their MS4 credit, which is either 44 or 115 pounds per foot. So it's interesting because they, in using this local modeling, we found out that actually they are able to claim either the default, or if you want to do the front end work and do site-specific data, there is actually benefit to doing that, because you can find sites with careful siting that produce a lot more than the default rate. And so I'm going to go into some details on what that looks like, because I think it's something that more municipalities need to be considering, sort of at the initial PRP level, is the site-specific data at that point could actually benefit them substantially. So there's a lot of resources out there. DEP has obviously all of the documents associated with development of PRPs, and then they also have a number of checklists for stream restoration BMP eligibility. They get for municipalities that use that sort of default rate. There's a checklist just for eligibility projects. I'll look at that. That's right here. That it kind of is like, okay, you can claim 115, but you need to be sure you meet the minimal siting requirements and design requirements. You've got to have a minimum length. You've got to have an O&M plan. You've got to have approved restoration approaches. So that's kind of a clip from that.
Yeah, and the other commentary I add is these regulations are absolutely evolving like through today and will continue to evolve. And I know that's frustrating for consultants to be advising their customers as a trusted advisor. And you guys have probably worked, many firms have worked with their municipal clients for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And that there's a great relationship and rapport there you guys have with municipalities. And it's tough when the DEP or any regulator kind of changes the regulatory landscape like mid MS4 permit cycle, or there's hints of like new evolving ways to kind of quantify MS4 sediment reduction, protocol 1, protocol 3, protocol 5, from the expert panel protocols. A lot of the research in the MS4 world has been coming from the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which just is what it is. There's less less research that has been done in the Ohio River watershed, the Delaware River watershed in Pennsylvania. Is that great? The Chesapeake Bay, methodologies are being applied across the entire state. I don't know. You could probably debate that. There's probably some unique differences within these different watersheds, obviously, but these are definitely evolving regulations. And I'll give you 2 examples. One, there was an open RFP for full delivery, design, build, operate, maintain, implementation of 500,000 pounds of sediment reduction. Big project, big multi-million-dollar thing. During the RFP, the DEP updated their frequently asked questions with a particular allowance that significantly impacted the cost of that contract value and what that delivery would look like during an open RFP. So, all of us need to be continually looking at the DEP's frequently asked questions, staying engaged with our regional and central office staff on these projects, because there's always kind of new things coming down the pike as all of us within this industry are learning, growing, getting projects done, seeing what's working, seeing what's not working. So the regulatory piece of this is, along with site selection and having the right team, is really pretty critical. Because again, you might have a 2,000-foot stream restoration BMP, that if viewed one way is going to generate 200,000 pounds. And you're like, oh, that's cool, let's do it. If you look at it from a different regulatory approach, as Hannah mentioned, simplified method, expert panel protocols, that same restoration BMP might generate 500,000 pounds if you do just a little bit additional work. And think of the cost savings potential, just kind of being able to work, if you will, navigate the regulatory environment in this really kind of niche-y thing that continues to evolve.
Yeah. So I'm going to dive into, hopefully it's not too boring. I'm going to give you a little nitty-gritty on the expert panel protocols. So there are a series of these protocols that have been published, and they continue to update them, that provide guidance specific to the Chesapeake Bay, but they also are being applied in Pennsylvania outside of the Chesapeake Bay, that help you determine the site-specific loading. So the exact amount of material, an estimate of the exact amount of material coming off a site annually as a result of erosion, but then also to determine what credit the site should have for whatever your pollutant of concern is. And so there's a number of them. We'll focus on protocol 1 today because that's the one that's really sensitive to how you pick your sites and where you pick them. And that is aimed at direct stabilization of sediment from in-stream sources, so eroding banks. When you're trying to find a I interchange good and bad. When you're trying to find a good MS4 site, it's got to be a bad stream. So what you're looking for is over-widened, deeply incised, ideally in that sort of higher range of drainage area in your watershed. You want it to have very little bank protection. You don't want it to be well vegetated. You need to be able to document active erosion on the site. So this is a picture of, this is actually from our Sinking Springs case study we'll see later. But the magic formula for coming up with loading is effectively get site-specific data for how tall your banks are, take some bank erodibility indices that that Roskin put together, and use them to come up with an erosion rate for every single piece of that bank. And then you are able to take the dimensions of the banks and turn that into a volume of material that's eroding from these sites. And so this is one piece of that is the BHI. That's one of the two erodibility indices where you're looking at the physical parameters. You know, how tall is the bank? What is the bank angle? What percentage cover does it have? John, can you go to the next one?
No. Yep.
Yeah. The other variable when you're trying to come up with those erosion rates are near bank stress, which effectively which bank is getting the stress into a bankful flooding event. Ideally, you want your foul leg, the deepest part of your stream, to be right in the center, so that you don't have any water attacking your banks. But most of the streams that you're looking at, you're going to have one bank or the other as you get these super highly eroded areas with all the near bank stress. So there's different methods for looking at that. You've got to be sure whoever you have doing this work is qualified and familiar with the protocols. John, you want to go to the next one?
And I think the quick analogy I'll use here is you don't have to do all this effort on the front end to assess these potential BMP locations. But again, in our experience, being the ones on the hook to deliver, 1 million pounds of sediment reduction for $1.95 a pound for the next 5 to 10, 15 years, we have to do these to really develop cost-effective projects that we can kind of guarantee we can do. And the quick analogy is, sometimes it makes a heck of a lot of sense to spend a nickel to save $1. And this is the spending of the nickel to save the dollar being, what's the overall cost of MS4 permit compliance?
Yep. Here is, this is sort of one of the outputs from doing all that upfront legwork. This is mapping that shows the range of bank erodibility indices on, this is our Veterans Park BMP, which is another one that we'll look at. But sort of the range from green to blue, it's a good indication on the front end of how high producing the site will be if you've got a lot of really highly erodible banks. And you have to be able to provide this level of documentation if you're going to be requesting credit above a certain efficiency. And so this is standard for what we would recommend if you're going to do the work, you should get credit for it. Next slide, John.
Yeah, and just Hannah, are you going to dive into the efficiency topic?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I'll go to the next slide.
I'll hold my thought there. Gotcha.
Yeah. So if you're really interested, there are all of these checklist documents for the expert panel protocols. If you're going to try and show eligibility under the different protocols, you have to jump through the hoops to provide the adequate documentation to do that. And so what that means is a lot of data up front and a lot of data on the back end. But if you do that, then you can actually claim above the standard efficiency. So typically, you would only be able to claim 50% efficiency. What that means is, hey, we showed our pre-construction load was this, and our post-construction load is this. And if you don't do the adequate legwork, they'll only allow you to claim 50% of what you believe is the true reduction value. So with 12 months of pre-construction data, with some secondary sources such as the bank pins that are shown in these pictures here, it is possible to get 75% of that credit. And then with 12 months post-construction validation, where you actually go back and redo the whole process after it's stabilized and the banks are repaired, you can claim up to 90% efficiency. And so there's pros and cons to doing this. If you don't have to, and you're happy with 115 pounds per foot, and you don't need, you don't have a substantial need, then you can go that route with a normal eligibility checklist. But this is definitely the way to go for anybody in the other camp. So.
And again, that analogy of spend a nickel to save a dollar, if the $500,000 stream restoration BMP is only giving you credit at 50% efficiency, do the math on the dollar per pound. If you spend some time and energy with the right people doing these assessments up front, during the design stage, during the post-construction monitoring, and that exact same project, $500,000 construction project, is now obtaining efficiency at 90%, you've essentially reduced the cost of that, compliance BMP in almost half. Not quite half, it's not 100%, but that really starts to move the needle when you're looking at the overall cost of compliance with that efficiency that the DEP will sign off on of 50% versus 75 versus 90. And again, evolving regulations. We've got some sites that we've done the math pre and post, and we think they're actually like 99% efficient. We're actually not getting the 99% credit or efficiency because the DEP as of today has kind of capped us at 90 if we do all this work, and if the restoration is certainly successful and we can document that with their data forms pre and post restoration. But again, from a big ticket, if you're a municipality or working with your clients who have several 100,000 pounds of sediment reduction per year, depending upon how you do the math here, how you assess your sites, you can really save hundreds or millions of dollars by doing the math, thinking through it and doing the math in a creative way, and kind of pulling all the levers at your disposal to do these projects as cost effectively as possible.
All right, what are we talking about doing? Some of you are probably familiar with natural channel design. Some of you are maybe familiar with this. It goes by other names. We call it floodplain restoration. The DEP calls it legacy sediment removal projects. What we propose to do is to tear off the Band-Aid and to fix the source of the impairment. So we are looking for streams that are impaired by legacy sediments, essentially the valleys filled in with sediment after all the trees were cut and the soil washed down in. And we do work to find what the existing channel and floodplain elevation should be. And then we restore the site back to what we think it should have been pre-settlement, which is a large, resilient, evolving wetland and stream complex with a wide valley that allows the energy and the water and the sediment to disperse over a wide area. And so this rendering is what we would be proposing, not usually with multiple channels, but we would propose to go into these eroded streams, find out what elevation they should be at, and then either cut down or fill back up to that elevation, and then install valley-wide grade control structures, either logs or rock buried in the floodplain so that it can never erode vertically again. And that allows the stream to kind of migrate as it would in a natural system. Never get those head cuts again. That would result in erosion and sediment transport. So we create a system that's going to capture everything on site, and in fact actually capture additional volume of water from elsewhere in the watershed and additional sediment from elsewhere in the watershed in these new floodplain wetlands that it wasn't interacting with. And so the design is pretty simple. We want our stream channel small, and we want the banks very low, 6 inches to 12 inches, so that even small rainfall events leave the stream instead of eroding it out and deposit that material in the wetlands. And so these are pictures from 2 sites in southwestern PA from our Robinson Fork Mitigation Bank. And this is a substantially larger stream system, but a really good example of what it's supposed to do when it floods and what it's supposed to look like. And so all these stick-ups, these trees are wood that's put into the floodplain for habitat and to add carbon into it. There's obviously a lot of other ecosystem benefits to doing this watershed scale approach. Anything else you want to say on this, John?
Yeah, the only thing I'd chime in on the, we're kind of now diving into, restoration design approaches. And honestly, even within our company, our company works across the country. We've got dozens of very experienced stream restoration designers, engineers, hydrologists. There can be some, I'll say, almost like theological debate within the stream restoration community of Dave Roskin, natural channel design versus legacy sediment versus stage 0 versus probably 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other kind of like design approaches. Within our company, we're using all of them in different locations around the country based on what fits and works in that setting. We realize that this floodplain restoration approach may not fit in every single community where there's streams that need restored. Some places are going to need more, in-stream structures, bank stabilization. But again, when you're on the hook for the pounds of sediment reduction at a fixed upfront cost, we have found this design approach is really just honestly the most cost effective. And then it kind of drives the site selection to find locations where you can do floodplain restoration, even on small headwater streams, and get all of the benefits of this restoration approach of a resilient stream you'll need to come back to and fix after the next rain event, during a September hurricane rolling through. So, and again, we've got some examples in pretty dang urban environments where we've used floodplain restoration and have not had to go back and fix things that are probably pretty similar to the communities that the folks here in the call live in and are looking for projects in. Obviously the picture here in the Valley is in southwestern Washington County. If everyone had this much room to work within, it'd probably be really easy for engineers to design these projects through floodplain restoration. We all have to live with the site constraints within these project sites, existing utilities. Our sites in Harrisburg area, we've got some leaking sewers, contributing excess nutrients to our wetlands the wetlands are also kind of sucking up. So there's all of that stuff that has to get factored into the design process, but really, especially in the site selection process, to see which design approach will work at that particular location to generate the most pounds of sediment reduction. So I'm going to, how about we pause here? Is there any Q&A we want to address right now before we dive into some?
Yeah, there are several questions, John, if we want to.
How about we'll start at the bottom? Maybe I'll address Barbara's questions first. Do we work on brownfield sites? Yes, maybe sometimes. If you're working on a contaminated site, you've now got a new dilemma of, what do you do with contaminated, working in and around and dealing with contaminated material. That can make things more expensive than the HOA subdivision's got a natural stream or the ag field type stream restoration projects. So definitely can. However, you need to factor in what the additional cost is if there's potential contaminants, again, during keeping your staff safe from an EHS standpoint during construction. Do you use HAZWOPER training because you're dealing with contaminated materials? So definitely can be considered, but it brings some other liabilities, and liabilities are cost. So what we work with, we don't actually physically work for the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission. This is just kind of a training opportunity with SPC. I'm not sure that really answers your question, but we certainly work with all kinds of individuals, universities. We've had some really neat collaborative case studies. Like for example, in Virginia, we did a couple $1 million stream restoration project to reduce phosphorus and nitrogen loading for the city of Richmond's MS4 permit. It was located on university property and provided a really cool platform to engage the university staff as well as the university students during the life cycle of that project as a living classroom, because there happened to be a multi-million-dollar stream restoration project sited on University of Richmond property. So yeah, that idea of collaborating with academia, we really, it can be difficult, honestly, to pull together lots of different, more chefs in the kitchen, if you will, but really some neat collaborative opportunities with academia in particular. Paul, Yes, the kind of stormwater volume. I mean, again, these MS4 BMPs are focused on pounds of sediment reduction, which tends to be the commodity within the MS4 world. In Maryland, we use impervious acre credits, which starts to look more like a volumetric kind of based unit of measurements. So absolutely can use the floodplain restoration approach to address stormwater volume issues. We try not to like overstate the flooding resiliency aspect of these floodplain restoration projects that are MS4 focused, but the reality is you're improving the flood storage capacity in a big way, and you are reducing the negative downstream impact of flood events. And when we get to this case study, I'll tell you about a big flood that came through this particular location, and thank God the stream was very stable. Maybe the first question. This might get towards protocol 3, Hannah, with the floodplain
there's 2
wetlands.
questions in this, John. I think in terms of, are we getting credit for increasing the amount of stormwater getting into the wetlands? We are. There's a protocol specifically targeting that, where we're getting increased sediment reduction credit for it. We're not getting any volume reduction credit for it. And then, I mean, the goal, I think, long term, the goal would be to be able to use these types of restorations to get to control volume for actual stormwater purposes. I know that that's something that we've talked with DEP staff about as a long-term goal.
And Barbara, the name of the company is Resource Environmental Solutions, or RES website. I'll put the website up here. Just we'll get that at the end of the presentation. So I'll dive back into the presentation here and just time check. I think we're going till 1:15, so we'll try to burn through these case studies pretty quickly. But the Sinking Springs MS4 pilot project was the first time that PennDOT used an alternative procurement approach to secure sediment reduction credit for PennDOT's MS4 permit. What they did is they put out a public RFP, or actually an IFB, or issue for bid, and said, we've got $750,000 to spend on MS4 compliance. You folks like RES, go find a site and kind of tell us how many pounds of sediment you can produce and kind of guarantee from that BMP in that site. And they would award that at the most number of pounds, which kind of translates to the lowest cost per pound. So they got four bid responses. The bids came in at $4.48 a pound. So 448 times 167 equals $750,000, up through almost $30 a pound of sediment reduction. So again, multiply $4 a pound versus $30 a pound, and your PennDOT and your annual sediment reduction goal across Pennsylvania is like 3 to 4 million pounds per year. Think of the cost savings when you're buying $4 a pound sediment reduction credit versus $30 a pound. And again, I'm not going to mention the names of these bidders. We've all learned a lot since this first bid. The other 2 bids were kind of in the middle, like 10 or 11 or $15 per pound. The kind of funny thing is we left some money on the table, so to speak, to be the low bid. But this was a really great case study for us to really prove that this procurement approach can work to really save folks a lot of money and a lot of liability and a lot of administrative costs. Like, there's one guy in PennDOT that's largely managing PennDOT's implementation of millions of pounds of sediment reduction BMPs per year, compared to just the way PennDOT would normally manage multiple $million-dollar contracts with all kinds of project managers, administrative staff. Really having one individual managing this humongous scope of work that's being done cost effectively, competitively bid is a pretty neat success story for PennDOT that again, I think is being applied across Pennsylvania. So Res, we identified this particular site here. Look at, that's I-83. So we're getting discharge and runoff directly from a 4-lane highway leading to this project site. We acquired the rights from the landowner to do this project. The landowner is a municipal authority. It's a public-private quasi, not state-owned, not county-owned, but again, kind of a municipal authority-owned property. PennDOT actually shared the sediment reduction benefits with the York County Planning Commission. York County has kind of county-wide stormwater consortium. Again, we'll get to that creative ideas on how to save time, energy, and money with these multi-municipal collaborations. PennDOT did the procurement, and out of the goodness of their heart, decided to share those credits with the York County Planning Commission. But the cool thing is, and again, really a cool restoration project. We as a company love doing these kind of projects. They're really feel good type projects. When we look at these projects, they're because this is all we do. So they're not that complex of projects. And when I say that, we were under contract in late 2018. We had the kickoff meeting with the PADEP, about 30 people in DEP's office outside Harrisburg. Kind of what the heck's this new MS4 BMP, design, build, operate, maintain? What's this look like? With that pre-application meeting was in January. We designed, permitted, and constructed this BMP in less than 12 months, which again, from a speed of implementation, when you have a different procurement approach and really niche companies doing the work, these projects oftentimes can get in the ground in less than 12 months. Again, the post-construction validation occurring a year later. So pre-construction, very similar impaired Pennsylvania streams, 2, 3, 4 foot high vertical eroding banks contributing hundreds of thousands of pounds of sediment. And again, those eroding stream banks are the source of impairment. That's the pollutant we're really trying to address with all these methodologies that Hannah described. So again, you take that 2 to 4 foot high raw eroding stream bank, and literally post-construction there's a 2 to 3 inch high stream bank with ENS matting on it, stabilization grasses. And then April 2020, 4 months later, first growing season, you took those 2 to 4 foot high raw eroding banks, and now they're again 1 to 2 inches and they're fully vegetated. You have removed all of that sediment loading potential from the landscape. And that's where the sediment reduction comes from, is removing the stream banks and removing the opportunity for stream bank erosion to occur within the project footprint. So again, immediately post-construction, 4 months later, again, 1 year later, the wetland trees are really growing in, becoming more established. These banks have nothing to erode. This particular project, again, pre and post, using those banks and beehive data collection, the sediment reduction efficiency at this location was over 99%, because you went from raw eroding banks to basically zero stream banks that are fully vegetated. The picture here on the right is actually just after a hurricane came through in September of 2021. That's I-83 in the background. Again, major stormwater contribution to the top of this project site. A week after that storm came through, or 2 or 3 days after the storm came through, zero damage. And again, we sweat those things too. If those things come through and damage our project sites, we're out there fixing them on our dime. So lots of good work in the ground that gives us the confidence that we build it one time and we're not coming back to build it again. I did not get a picture from this year. I'll need to get one for my next presentation. So again, this is the very bottom of that restoration project, looking upstream on the left into beautiful lush wetlands, and then turning around and looking directly downstream at unrestored streams, which is what the majority of this project looked like. Ironically, Hannah and our team are working on a permit application right now to actually complete the restoration downstream, kind of build out the rest of this restoration project, which is going to include almost a mile of stream restoration. What we're doing with the rest of the project is actually not an MS4 BMP. We're doing it for another customer that needs a wetland stream restoration project. But again, with the ability to kind of co-locate multiple projects at one location and really maximize the watershed benefits. Another kind of unique PennDOT led opportunity, but kind of starts to tap into municipal partnerships. Paxton Creek includes several municipalities, but the majority of it is in Lower Paxton Township, Susquehanna Township, and then drains to the city of Harrisburg. where Capital Region Water is their local utility and kind of runs their MS4 program. So those three municipalities, and HRG was their consultant. I think really, to their credit, I mean, like good planning on their part. They had already developed a joint PRP to kind of collaborate and share resources and kind of share the implementation of projects. It'd be hard to maybe quantify the financial benefit of those three entities by banding together under a joint PRP, but it probably is in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars over the long term by collaborating together at the outset, just with those three municipalities. And then the really cool thing was they kind of layered PennDOT on top of that as a fourth kind of partner on this project. Again, competitively bid. I think they also got 3 or 4 bids from folks like ourselves, ranging from $3.49 a pound to $12.77 a pound. And again, if you're keeping dollars per pound in mind, our first bid was $4.48 a pound. We sharpen our pencil, we learn, we know how to do this stuff better, and we're now down to $3.49 a pound. This is what competition does amongst kind of qualified entities, is drive down costs for everyone as folks like us really need to get more competitive as we're looking for project sites that we're going to implement. So all 4 different partners involved. Again, kind of contract, a really cool story. Contract in place September 2020. Permit applications Hannah probably submitted late 2020, early 2021. 3 different BMPs across, I think 2 of them were in one township. The other BMP was in a third township. All 3 BMPs permitted and constructed in 2021. But again, 3 different BMPs. Again, from a land standpoint, one of the BMPs was actually an identified BMP within that joint PRP that I'd mentioned. And again, we looked at it. We looked at dozens, 50 plus different locations across. Spent a lot of time, again, spend a nickel to save a dollar, a lot of time assessing potential restoration projects. And lo and behold, one of the ones identified by really a qualified engineering firm turned out to be a dang good project site. And it's one we rolled into that contract. One of the BMPs was on a private HOA apartment complex, had kind of the right size stream, the right attributes to it to be a cost-effective BMP. Then the largest BMP was an interesting one where it was on partially on a township park. The stream then drained into state-owned property, and we actually executed an agreement with DGS, I think it is, maybe Fish and Boat Commission, because the Fish and Boat Commission's office literally is, let's see if it's visible here, that the parking lot on the right-hand side, that's Fish and Boat Commission's office. So aggregating all 3 projects under one contract, if you actually sliced and diced the dollars per pound, the 2 smaller BMPs were a lot higher than $3.49. The one large BMP, just from a volume savings efficiency standpoint, was lower. They kind of all balanced in at $3.49 a pound, which was our contractual obligation. But again, bundling more things into larger projects and larger contracts allows you to take advantage of some volume efficiencies and savings. But this was actually the first time in our experience or our knowledge that several municipal partners collaborated with PennDOT doing the procurement, and all 4 of those partners contributing financially to the project, and then all 4 of them equally sharing the sediment reduction benefits and the credit. So pre-construction, again, you guys probably all have many similar looking, unfortunately, kind of beat up streams, within your township parks, within your HOAs, maybe on your own properties. Obviously, they look worse this time of year in the wintertime when you really can see the level of impairment. But pre-restoration, this was the Veterans Park BMP, township park, state-owned land. Post-construction, less than a year later, if some of those pictures were taken, the Fish and Boat Commission's, again, office is right on the hill on the right-hand side of the picture on the right. Let me see if we have, some additional pictures here. This spring in May or June timeframe, you folks in the call here may not have seen the press release, but the governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, introduced Pennsylvania's first Native Species Day, to kind of commemorate the value of native species and habitat biodiversity. They used this project site as the kind of case study for good projects that have co-benefits, including the increase of biodiversity and habitat diversity within our communities, and all the other benefits that come along with that from a social health, social justice standpoint, accessibility to nature, biodiversity for pollinators, bugs, bees, the things that produce the food we need to eat. So there can be a lot of really neat co-benefits of these projects if they're designed, cited, well thought through, prior to implementation. So again, I mentioned that this is something we tackle, deal with a lot. Just because an area is forested does not mean it doesn't have sediment loading and impairment, as well as have restoration potential. I like this picture because it's a good visual. This is a larger stream, obviously, but if you see the tree right behind the back of the gentleman in the picture who's hanging over a 4 to 5 foot high eroding bank, that exact same tree is the one that's currently in the stream 1 year later. And you think of the thousands of pounds of sediment coming off of just that one stream bank. That's the source of sediment loading and sediment pollution. If you want another visual on in a forested setting. This was just a larger stream reach in Western Pennsylvania. Again, farmer had pushed that stream towards the valley wall, active sedimentation on this left-hand bank. We moved that stream back into the middle of the valley. Again, took those 2 to 3 foot high raw eroding stream banks and post restoration within one growing season down to 2 to 3 inches, entirely vegetated, i.e. no sediment to come off of those banks on a larger stream reach. This is the kind of example of a kind of a medium-sized stream reach. We typically work on this size or smaller, probably smaller ones. But again, this is a very typical view, probably in many of our watersheds across Pennsylvania, in every single corner of the state, unfortunately. But again, active sediment loading and impairment within even a pretty healthily forested setting. All of that sediment dumps into the stream. Those nitrogen, phosphorus molecules become waterborne, get washed on downstream, leads to the eutrophication, all the other water quality problems that we're trying to address. Post-restoration, essentially no stream banks. This is kind of a smaller headwater system, perennial stream. Sean Yeaman's another one of our project managers here. Sean's like 6'4", so that stream bank there is probably about 3 foot 1 inches. These are all over Pennsylvania. This is probably a really good sized stream to be focused on for MS4 projects. Really manageable headwater stream, but still a very large contributor of sediment to the watershed. Creative partnerships. I think we're getting towards the very tail end here, and we have some time for Q&A. I think maybe some other ones popped up, but creative partnership opportunities. And again, full disclosure, we are not a municipal engineering firm. We are not planners. There's a ton of great folks on the call here that are doing the municipal engineering, the planning work, developing PRPs, identifying project sites. That's just not what we do, but we acknowledge that a lot of folks are out there doing that good work. And again, one of the goals being, how the heck do we find money to pay for these projects to get them in the ground? It just feels like one more regulatory burden. I forget, unfunded mandate oftentimes is the term that we hear from municipal customers on. This thing gets pushed on them by the DEP and EPA and the government, and how the heck do we do this and how do we pay for this? PennDOT can be a potentially pretty attractive partner to bring into the fold. We're not here to overstate the amount of partnership potential with PennDOT. You all on the call probably know your local PennDOT districts. They're out there and they have the biggest MS4 permit responsibilities in the entire state. They're doing this design, build, operate, maintain contracting. You may find that there's a creative partnership opportunity. We have a contract with PennDOT in the Chesapeake Bay. This is a call out to all the engineers and folks living in Chesapeake Bay. We can roll on new additional BMPs onto our existing contract through this design, build, operate, maintain approach, where PennDOT does the procurement. You're not even paying us as a company. You're giving the money to PennDOT, and PennDOT's just facilitating the project on your behalf, and really, getting good work in the ground pretty dang quickly through that really, innovative opportunity with PennDOT. Kind of tongue in cheek a little bit, but if you're looking for creative partnerships, look at each other in the room. A lot of the engineering firms, you guys probably work with several municipalities within a watershed. Maybe kind of taking the blinder off, so to speak, of, hey, I've got to look within just my municipality, just within my urbanized area. yeah, again, we as a company, we're always looking at, kind of watershed scale type projects, bigger, better projects to reduce cost for our clients. There's a lot of, and again, in the Chesapeake Bay, where this stuff is kind of originated in Pennsylvania, a lot of innovative partnerships that are more at a county level, or I say more importantly, at a watershed level, where a bunch of municipalities can pull their resources and get bigger, better, cheaper projects in the ground that lowers the cost of compliance for all of those different partnerships. And it could be a really involved joint PRP, and some of the engineering firms have a great handle on how to do that. We don't, that's not, we, again, not selling ourselves here. That's not what we do. Talk to your municipal engineer, get some ideas from them. If we can happy to share any intel that we have and what we've seen work in other locations. But folks banding together, whether it's kind of formally through a joint PRP focused on a watershed or some other kind of area, or just simply co-funding projects together. That is actively happening in Pennsylvania, where 2 or 3 municipalities said, hey, there's a really good restoration project that's 2 townships away, but it's within my watershed. I'm gonna put some money towards that project, pull my resources with 2 other municipalities, figure out who's going to do the procurement piece of it, and we'll all get lower cost sediment reduction benefits by pooling our resources, by doing some, a little bit outside the box creative thinking. A couple of other ideas here that really want to throw out there, because there's some some good ideas out there. I mentioned the kind of farmer and landowner. So I'm part of a local CSA that my wife and I have been a part of for about the past 15 years. Our farmer Karen, is actually got some NRCS money to retrofit her online farm pond to help improve the water access for her farming operations on a small 15-acre, kind of organic farm. Karen asked me to kind of take a look at that with her. I don't think this is going to work, honestly, but what my mind first went to is, hey, you've got money to build something that's within this kind of ecological restoration, water resources, kind of standpoint. Let's talk to the township. Maybe while you're out there building, rebuilding your farm pond, we can implement some sort of BMP that also provides sediment reduction benefit to the municipality while you're out there doing the work on this farm pond project. I don't think it's going to work out in that particular municipality, but again, there's some folks are building stuff out there. If you can layer your project on top of their project and share some of the project costs, you might be able to find you can get some sediment reduction benefit, relatively low cost, by just kind of tagging along with someone else's project. I kind of mentioned here a touchy one, but working with developers, including solar developers, might be proposing large projects in your townships, in your municipalities. Again, if they're out there doing something that's changing the stormwater dynamics on a project site, maybe throwing in some extra work towards a restoration BMP while you're building the basin. Let's restore a couple hundred feet of stream on the property. And it gives another opportunity to kind of collaborate with those developers. The developers are always coming to townships looking for permits to work with them to get their projects built and in the ground. You might find there's some kind of innovative opportunities. I mentioned solar by name because we do a lot of work for large scale utility solar developers. Our focus tends to be on mitigation or large scale veg management plans. We have an in-house nursery that produces thousands and thousands of pounds of native seed. I've kind of pitched some of our solar developers who are in the midst of pretty contentious township level conversations. Hey, you're taking that 200-acre soybean farm and turning it into a 5-megawatt solar facility. You're out there working, changing the entire vegetative community. Let's do some riparian buffer plantings within those stream corridors that aren't going to shade your panels while you're out there working. And how cool would it be for you as a solar developer to come back to a township to say, I need your help getting through this zoning issue to get my solar project permitted and get through land use issues. While I'm out here building my solar farm, I'm going to implement a 500 linear foot riparian buffer project because it's the right thing to do. It kind of fits into my vegetation management plan anyway. And you might find there's some really kind of creative partnerships there that just require a little bit of, looking under rocks to find, what works with, based on a particular location, a particular developer who's looking to do work within your municipality. the last thing, and this is not a exhausted list of potential partnerships, is a lot of large companies have, are developing kind of water focused environmental sustainability, social justice programs. You might find if you've got a large corporation, there's a lot of large corporations, oil and gas operators, energy operators, manufacturing companies based in the Pittsburgh area. A lot of those companies are actually putting money into programs to do good work on the ground in the communities where their staff live, where their offices are located, that have a water component to them. And I'm just throwing this example out there. A lot of oil and gas companies have their headquarters in South Point, Canonsburg area. If you've been to South Point, there's a lot of eroding streams through the South Point area. Who freaking knows if this will work, but might not be a bad idea to talk to some of those energy companies that sit in South Point to say, hey, can we work with you guys to restore some of these streams? You get some benefit or credit for your ESG, CSR compliance that you want to show Wall Street. You're a good corporate citizen within the community where you work. You might find there's some actual real dollars out there that can be utilized by municipalities to build MS4 BMPs in a little bit of an alternative way. And everyone comes out for the press release. Everyone gets the photographs to put on LinkedIn, social media. Everyone gets a little bit of the benefit from that. But again, how do we find the money to get these projects in the ground as quickly and as cost effectively as possible? So I'm not going to spend here, but I mentioned earlier that every single other state and community is dealing with MS4. I'm going to just use this as one example. In Maryland, the exact same challenges all of us here in Pennsylvania are facing with water quality issues. How do we pay for this? In Maryland, they just have, they do it at a county level, and B, as opposed to a sediment reduction credit or a pound of sediment reduction, their unit of measurement is an impervious acre credit. It actually lends itself a little bit more towards some other BMPs besides just stream restoration. So we've done several kind of water, stormwater basin retrofit projects along with some stream restoration at the outlet. Kind of gets into Protocol 5, which is kind of becoming a thing here in Pennsylvania. But every other state is tackling it in different ways. And why I use this slide is many states, and we see this as a company because we're operating in a bunch of states around the country. This full delivery or design, build, operate, maintain approach is being implemented by a lot of other states, a lot of other communities as the way to get this work done as cost effectively as possible and put the responsibility on folks like us to guarantee it's going to work for fixed upfront cost, which is kind of the story we've been telling here, through the presentation. So we're done yapping officially. Looks like one more question came through. And also, here's Hannah and my email addresses. If anyone, wants to reach out to us, res.us is the link to our company's website. Tons of really cool case study videos. Get a sense of what we do around the country. I'm going to pull up the Q&A here. Will this presentation recording be available to view later? I am 95% sure it is, and I will defer to Dan to respond to that in more detail. I'll maybe Dan might have to drop off, but I am to the anonymous attendee. I believe it is. I think Dan's going to send a follow-up email that might have some links to the SBC website where this, I believe, will be shared. Okay, here's a good one. Where do you usually place legacy sediments that you remove from a site? That's a great freaking question. I would say that the biggest single construction cost line item is where are we putting the excess sediment? I'm going to go back to the. I'll give you a real nice visual because that's a big dollar amount for these projects, especially this floodplain restoration legacy sediment approach. I'm going to go back to the very first slide to answer. I didn't catch the name. Beth's question. Let me see if I can share or draw. The excess sediment went right here and right here. So we end up having to find the closest location, so we're not hauling sediment on the road and disposing of it at a landfill, some other location, the watershed. If we can't hide the spoil, the soil, the sediment somewhere on site, it kind of breaks down our cost efficiencies. So we oftentimes end up finding other locations on the same property. Now, again, legacy sediment, I'll use that term. The sediment we're removing from the floodplain probably washed into it from the adjacent fields. These are relatively low grading areas. There is some topography coming down into this area. The sediment we put back in those adjacent fields, that's where it came from over the past 20 or past 100, 200 years of kind of just lack of stormwater management at these locations. So we have gotten, as a company, we've had to get very creative to figure out where to hide that soil on site so that we don't have a mountain. I'll use a funny example, and I work with the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission a lot. If you've been on the Turnpike, you probably have seen several new mountains off of their various interchanges. That is because they couldn't afford to go put the soil somewhere else that was generated from their construction project. We have the exact same challenge, and requires a lot of creativity. Again, I mentioned having the construction guys and gals out there during site selection to find out where we can put the sediment that the landowner's okay with. What we oftentimes do is end up spreading it out, what we call soil lifts within agricultural field areas. This field here, the farmer came back through and planted corn and soybean on top of that field, probably within a few weeks or months of this picture being taken. So finding creative locations to hide it on site is the name of the game. How much typically, again, we're not professional geology. We have PGs on staff, but from a soil contamination standpoint, typically if you're leaving it on the site, you can leave it on site without extensive tracking it as a contaminated material. Again, this maybe ties back to the kind of brownfield conversation. We have done some large water, resource focused restoration projects that have had contaminated soil we've had to deal with. One of them was in Philadelphia, kind of legacy fill in the Delaware River waterfront area. We were able to kind of hide or cap some of that contaminated soil, the hottest stuff on site, and kind of cap it between a parking lot and an underground stormwater retention facility. That project also had some contaminated soil that we had to get rid of off-site, and we worked with our environmental consultant to find a beneficial reuse location for commercial development that was cheaper than landfilling it. If you're landfilling contaminated soil, your project's probably not going to fly from a cost standpoint. Again, if you're chasing the lowest cost projects, and we really haven't. I don't know that we as a company. Well, we've got a site in the Swatara Creek watershed that's kind of the old Pennsylvania anthracite coal region. We've got a lot of coal finds in that area. We're trying to kind of figure that out. This last question here on that particular project site. In general, we're trying to keep things on that site to minimize the cost of moving it off the site. Well, it is 1 p.m. and we're actually late. So I thought we were ending at 1:15. It was 12:45. So if there's no other questions, I think we can wrap the call up. We may have lost Dan. I think Dan did have a schedule conflict. But I think Dan from SPC is going to send out a follow-up email to all the attendees. Really appreciate everyone's time, listening to us kind of share kind of what we're passionate about, what we've learned over the past couple of years. And certainly if there's ever opportunity to follow up offline, you have our information here. You'll have it in follow-up from Dan, and look forward to potentially collaborating. So without that, we will wish you all a really good day.
Thanks, folks.